Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we talk about two seemingly endless topics for the Sikh community: political violence and media misinformation. A dangerous Indian national that Canada just cannot get rid of, and more violence in Kashmir. And on a more peaceful note, we take another look at that magical land of Ladakh. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to the viewers out there. Thank you for your comments. We see it just happened to be a glitch on yesterday's show, so we're really happy, or I guess the day before. But we're happy to see that your comments are coming in again, and they're fast and furious. Thank you, everyone. Keep them up, and back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and James and I will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. Of course, we will be taking a look at a lot of those great comments which have been filling up below our videos, so thanks so much for those. And on with the show, let's start taking a look at some of the news items hitting the headlines today. James, what have you got for us today?
Well, Angus, I've got a couple of stories here, but one I just wanted to touch on before I get into the main stories, and that's to invite the viewers along in the next show. I'm going to do a story that's designated to Harmeet Dillon, who is a member and one of the leaders of the Republican Party in the U.S. at a national level. She is a human rights lawyer. She came to America as a 2-year-old with her Sikh parents, and she has worked hard and actually is a statue and the virtue of what the America was built on, about emigrating and just building an amazing life and chasing your dreams. So I'm going to focus on that in the next episode. But she actually got to say the Sikh prayer at the conclusion of day one of the National Convention, which is just a huge opportunity. But of course, it came with some backlash and a bit of conflict, which we'll discuss in the next episode. So moving along, let's take a look at an individual in Canada who we just cannot seem to get rid of. And it's one of these stories that actually is very polarizing across the country, because a lot of people would like this individual deported. They don't think that he should still be here, while others on a humanitarian basis believe that he should be allowed to stay. So let's take a look at the story first of all. He was driving a tractor trailer in rural Saskatchewan, which is our prairie provinces, and as he came to an intersection with the main highway, he was coming along one of the side streets that approaches. Very visible stop signs flashing red, and he just blew right through the stop sign into the highway and collided with a bus carrying the Humboldt Broncos junior hockey team. 16 individuals were killed on the bus, and another 13 were injured, and some of them lifelong injuries, paralyzed, and, that's a whole other story about these individuals. Now, both the victims' families and the overall community and the country are at odds as to what to do with him. When he was sentenced, he pled guilty, so he did take responsibility for his actions. Now he is, arguing the point that he showed remorse, that he took responsibility. But at the same time, prior to this incident, he was actually guilty of 70 infractions against the Motor Vehicle Act and Canadian law when it came to the safe operation of a truck. He came to Canada in 2014. This incident happened in 2018, in which, when he did plead guilty, was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He was recently given parole from the prison, and upon that parole issuance, he was ordered deported from the country. He started off the delays by applying first to have that decision overturned. The courts overrode him based on strictly immigration law. Now, a lot of people were screaming that it was a racist-based system, and it's hard to really explain that it's an immigration law. People understand that when they come to the country and get their permanent residency, that if they breach a major Canadian law, that they will be removed from the country and they will surrender. Now, where this gets tricky, and even I am at odds with myself about whether to deport him or allow him to stay. So right now, he has filed another petition on humanitarian grounds to reinstate his permanent residency. Now, where I have the issue is not in the fact of him being deported for such a heinous act that caused the deaths of so many, but where he has taken, again, responsibility. He has served his time in jail, and he has a young child who has respiratory and lung issues. Going back to India could be detrimental to the child's health. And my humanitarian and my empathy goes towards not punishing the child who has these medical issues and his wife. So it's really something that's touched on nerves across Canada, and it's just really ignited debate over our immigration laws. And again, some people are calling it a racist law, but again, it is strictly based on we don't want people to come to Canada, break the laws, kill people, and not have to, not have to leave the country and make room for someone who's going to respect the laws and the regulations that are here. Given that, he was a fairly new truck driver, and I would say that there's probably a lot of liability on the company in which he was working for by not supervising him properly, by not training him properly, and not ensuring that he was in compliance with the laws. And unfortunately, some employers do take advantage of people in that situation to force them out onto the road in unsafe vehicles and to operate over legal operating hours. There's just so many complex issues that come into this that, again, even I'm personally torn one way or the other. And, it's going to be a wait and see now, because this will delay his deportation for up to several years as his application gets pushed through the system. So again, it's just something that I thought was important to talk about, because I know that there's a lot of division within all communities across Canada on this, but there's also an international community that's watching to see how our immigration laws and our Immigration and Refugee Board handles this quite unique situation in what it is. So with that, I'll set it back to you there for your perspective there, Angus.
It's one of those stories where there are no winners. The whole story is just one long story of tragedy. An awful lot of people have lost their lives. Young people have lost their lives. Lives have been changed by that accident. And then this gentleman who's clearly broken the law, his life is effectively ruined, as potentially is that of his son, as you mentioned. So yeah, it's not a racist story, as you say. The racism doesn't enter this. It's a story about the law, and it's interesting because there are lots of similar stories here in the UK, in Europe, and indeed the US. And I'll give you some examples. We have an issue here in the UK with Islamic extremism, and our intelligence services and law enforcement are forever trying to uncover all sorts of dreadful terrorist plots that do occur. And quite often we in the UK are faced with trying to deport a lot of these extremist preachers who are essentially drumming up recruits for terrorist activities. And so, again, it's nothing to do with racism. This is just a simple, you are breaching UK law. You're breaking UK law by inciting violence. So we try to deport these people. And of course, the legal system kicks in, and these people are allowed legal representation, and they fight deportation, and quite often they win. And they end up staying in this country, but they end up actually languishing in jail for many years. And we had a preacher recently who was finally deported to the US to face more trials in the US. He's a very well-known, I'm trying to think of his name, but he was a very well-known Islamic preacher who just basically preached hate and recruited for terrorist activities. He's now in prison in the US. But again, it was years and years and years of the UK trying to deport this character who was charged with all sorts of anti-terror laws and breaking the law, and he finally was deported to the US. Let's turn that on the head, though, because I'll follow that one, because there's another example in France. The UK and Canada and the US, I would say, are very lenient in the sense that our laws are very, very balanced, and I would say are very mature in terms of always taking the principle that you are innocent until proved guilty. And which is why a lot of these people struggle to be deported, as in this case. This guy has legal representation who are fighting for his rights, as it should be in any fair and balanced legal system. It takes the emotion out of it, and it's just based on pure legal principles of fairness and justice.
Right.
Recently, there was a case in France where, again, an Islamic preacher was preaching hate and drumming up terrorist activity. And the French were ruthless. And the French legal system, I'm not an expert on it, but it is based on a slightly different principle. And essentially, they charged this character with anti-terrorist activity, with terrorism activity, and they didn't just deport him. Literally within within the same day, he was stripped of his citizenship. And I forget where exactly he was deported to. But that's how ruthless the French treated somebody in this situation. They literally, as soon as he was found guilty, he was deported that same day within 8 hours of the verdict and stripped of his citizenship. Wow. And then just one other sort of little anecdote on this. This is where it turns everything on its head. We had a very sad case here in the UK, and it was an American citizen, a lady, and she was married to a US diplomat. And when she was leaving, I think it was late at night, she was leaving a US Army base here in the UK. And in the US, they drive on the right. Here in the UK, we drive on the left. And she, of course, like many foreigners do, and in reverse, we do it on the continent, she forgot to drive on the left-hand side of the road. And as was her natural instinct, she drove on the right. And unfortunately, she hit a young lad who was driving a motorbike and killed him. It's a terrible story, and she then ran home, told her husband, who's a very high-ranking US diplomat, and he was advised, leave the country. So him and his wife literally got on a plane that day and fled the UK. Now, this left the family of this young man who was killed without justice. The UK have since been trying to deport this lady back to the UK to face justice, and she's refused, which in my opinion is cowardly. Terrible thing to do. You know, you did the crime. It was an accident, but at least face what you should be facing in justice. So, but again, there are no winners in all this. All these cases, it's not about racism. It's about the simple law doing what the law needs to do, James. So interesting story. Brings up a lot of issues that we could talk for a long time about.
It is, and as I said, at least with Jaskrit Singh Sidhu there, that he took responsibility. He didn't want the families to have to go through a very torturous and onerous trial. So, I do respect him for that, but at the end of the day, he still did take those innocent lives and cause irreversible damage to others. So it's one of those stories that will follow, but it's a tough one on either side.
Yeah.
So with that, we're going to move on to the next story, which, again in Kashmir, the rebels have taken their position and gone to a Hindu-dominated part of Kashmir because security is a bit more relaxed there. And they are, again, ambushing soldiers. 4 more soldiers have been killed while they are out there searching for these insurgents and the militants. Now, what has happened is that as you can see in the story here, this happened in the Jammu division in the Doda district, and they are, in terms of the whole situation that we're seeing, the violence. One thing I found interesting about this article was that the Indian Army is saying that the militants are actually fighting the Indian control of the region and the Indian controlled parts of Kashmir. So a lot of times they blame it on the 2 different sectors and the 2 different populations that are fighting each other. And this is one of the first times I've seen it very clearly where it was stated that it is, an uprising or a protest and fight about the control of Kashmir by India. So I just thought that was an interesting twist to this story because, as I said, it's not something that is often recognized in the mainstream media or other media at that point. So right now in the area, as I said, they are moving into the Hindu-dominated area from the Muslim-controlled or majority regions of that area, because the Indian Army has not built up such a strong presence. So it gives them a bit of flexibility. It gives them a bit of leeway in terms of hiding, escaping, and planning their ambush attacks. So again, more lives senselessly lost in Kashmir, and it's just an ongoing struggle for everybody on all sides there to find some type of solution, because this has been going on for decades. It's not a recent uprising or a recent problem. It's something, again, that Angus and I have touched on that goes way back, to partition 1947, and, a lot of struggles and uprisings between then and now. So, I'm going to cut that one a little short, because I just wanted to make sure that at the beginning I had brought up Harmeet Dillon and the amazing opportunity that she had to say that prayer. And again, I'll do a special segment on her, because I think she's very inspiring, not just to the Sikh community, but I think all communities. So I'll throw that back right at you, Angus.
Yeah, wow. It's, I've said a lot about Kashmir, and I don't think there's much point going over the same thing again, but I did see in the press a couple of days ago the funeral of one of the young Indian soldiers who was killed in that ambush a few days ago. And it did bring it home again. And this young lad, he was young. He was in his early 20s, I think. And there was a photograph of him in his uniform and his family, looking resplendent, and his proud family, standing beside him. And it's a story of tragedy. And my heart went out to that family, thinking, this young Indian soldier, with his whole life ahead of him, his proud family, he's in his uniform, and he's got so much to look ahead in his life, and his life cut short in some valley in Kashmir just through an ambush. It's the whole story. There is, again, you use this phrase I used earlier, there are no winners here. There are people dying almost daily in Kashmir because of this situation, and it's on both sides. The Indian Army are going in with brute force, as they are instructed to, as they are ordered to. And so those young lads in the uniform in the Indian Army, they're just doing what they've been ordered to. And of course, they themselves are paying the price. They are coming up against the militants, who in turn are doing what they feel motivated to do. But again, these young lads are coming home in body bags. So, my heart goes out to both sides here. And we do criticise India a lot, and particularly the regime. But we do tend to often forget that just the simple tools of the regime, the army, are paying the price. And this goes out to any soldier, and anybody who's served in an armed force anywhere in the world has a natural affinity to any other soldier, even with the enemy, on the enemy's side, because at the end of the day, soldiers are just trained to do what they do it well. And they are not politically motivated on the whole. They're not motivated by whatever is motivating their leaders, their political leaders. They're just doing their job. They're proud soldiers. They're proud to wear their uniforms. They're proud to do a job that they do well. And the same with the British Army. And this has happened in many conflicts where, and certainly the British Army, we've fought against an awful lot of armies over the years and over the centuries. And the Sikhs and the Gurkhas are prime examples of this almost camaraderie between soldiers on the ground, where political leaders, they're the ones that create wars. It's not the soldiers, it's the leaders, the politicians that create wars. The soldiers on the ground are just, generally speaking, young men just doing, well, what they enjoy. It's a bit perverse to say that, but they enjoy the adventure, they enjoy wearing a uniform, they enjoy supporting a flag, they enjoy the simple act of soldiering. And they always have respect for the other soldiers that they come up against. And this happened with the British Empire against the Sikhs and the Gurkhas. They met these equally noble, equally brave, courageous people in battle. And they did what they did. They fought their battles. But at the end of it, there was always this deep, ingrained respect for those soldiers that they came up against. Hence why the Sikhs were invited into the British Army. So yeah, and I'm going off on a tangent here because we've talked about the big political wrongs of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. But yeah, let's not forget that there's the human story, the human element to this. That there are young men on both sides who are dying for a stupid conflict over territory. Once again, James, it's this is a story reflected across the world and throughout time.
Absolutely, and they're fighting for a dream, and that dream was the generations of people who came before them that actually achieved the dream to build a nation, to build the infrastructure, to build a life. And now these young individuals are fighting to keep that dream and to keep their homeland, to keep their customs and their culture, while also trying to achieve their own dreams for their own future. But instead, they're found within a nightmare created by different leadership. And again, like we keep saying, Angus, there is just no winner in war. There's no winner in violence. And it's just a shame to see it continue like this.
Yeah, and actually, and again, I'll go off on a slight tangent here, but it is always about extremism. It's either political extremism or religious extremism. And I won't say every religion, because I can't think of any Sikh extremism that I've encountered. But certainly most religions that I can think of have an extremist element. And it's always the extremist element on the fringes of these religions that cause the issues, whether it's Islamic, even Christian fundamentalism has its issues. And we've certainly seen that through history. The Catholic religion, the extremist elements, and a link back to what you talked about, and we will cover the story tomorrow. This Sikh lady who has appeared at the Republican convention in Wisconsin to give her speech. There was a backlash on social media, and again we'll talk more about this in detail tomorrow. But there was a backlash against her appearing, delivering a Sikh prayer at this convention from Christian fundamentalists, from the extremist side of the Christian religion. And I read these and I just thought, just leave it alone. And as I say, most religions are guilty of this. And it's these fringe elements that cause all these issues, the global issues in many cases, and people die because of this extremism. So, James, no winners.
And there were even some Sikh people who were upset that they felt she was using the religion to advance the political agenda there. So again, something we'll touch on tomorrow, but I'm going to focus more on her rising to where she is. But we'll of course touch on the reactions to the prayer as well.
Yeah. Okay, well let's follow this theme of violence, unfortunately, through to my first story. The Sikh Coalition have released a statement, a press release, after the situation with Donald Trump. And of course, just a few days ago, there was that attempt on Donald Trump's life. A young 20-year-old lad, driven by whatever motives that will no doubt come out in due course. But the Sikh Coalition have released a statement, I think, essentially to make their position and the position of the Sikh community very clear. They call it a reflection on the dangers of political violence. And they refer to Donald Trump's assassination attempt from the other day. And they very clearly condemn it. And they also make the statement, they call for a lowering of the temperature of the national dialogue with less inflammatory rhetoric. Because, of course, a lot of these extremists on all sides, as we talked about, use inflammatory rhetoric, inflammatory language, deliberately whipping up people into fervour, into zeal. It's that attitude that is pushing these people generally with mental illness into these acts of violence. It's not normal people. It's people who are on the fringes of, let's just say, who are struggling with their mental health, who are then pushed by this inflammatory language into taking direct action, this violence, basically. And they say openly encouraging, tacitly supporting, or even joking about political violence is always wrong. This is true regardless who is targeted or who is spreading the harmful rhetoric. And actually, I'll refer back to what we were laughing about the other day, James. I'm laughing even now about this slapping. This is political violence. We shouldn't condone it. And as I've said, those slaps in many cases have been justified in the context of why those individuals were slapped. But the point here is it is valid, is even joking about political violence, it leads on to greater violence. Right. So we shouldn't really joke about it. They
Absolutely.
talk about...
And those were more in terms of public humiliation than they were about the physical violence. But at the same time, I totally agree with you, Angus.
Indeed. So the Sikh Coalition talk about this plot against President Trump. And they say that the claims that President Biden was behind this attack should be condemned because they say he is not behind it. Of course, he is not behind it and he should not be accused of that. And they also refer to some other situations. There was a plot to kidnap the sitting governor of Michigan, the assault on the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's husband, etc., etc. And they ask for a bipartisan and good faith messaging that is meant to unite rather than divide our country. So again, they're referring to this rhetoric. All it's doing is dividing the country, and it is dividing communities, which an interesting parallel there, of course, to the tactics of the nationalists in India, the RSS and the BJP, and their divisive language, which has essentially had this same effect. They also refer to a bit of misinformation that came out very quickly after the incident. And they joined with Asian American, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities in the US to denounce the New York Post, who falsely reported that the shooter was a Chinese man. He was from Oriental ethnicity, which actually, of course, is not the case. But of course, this misinformation and disinformation was immediately released by the New York Post, and I think it's still up there now, even though obviously it's patently false. But they're saying it is very dangerous to have this knee-jerk reaction, to suddenly report misinformation without verifying it, without corroborating it, because even misinformation can have an immediate effect. And my mind actually instantly is going back to 1984, the genocide, where Congress politicians, after the assassination of Indira Gandhi, went immediately on the radio and started chanting these Hindu nationalist chants, whipping up the Hindu mobs, who then went out and massacred tens of thousands of men, women and children, instantly tortured them, burnt them to death, shot them in the streets. I mean, we've talked about the genocide. But that was, again, a direct result of misinformation, of politicians going on the radio and publicly making irresponsible, dangerous statements. And the public listen to these statements and they react to these statements. So so this and they talk further about this, and they talk about that the Sikh community should unite with all other communities to condemn violence, political violence on any level. So it makes a lot of very basic statements, but they do refer to bigger issues here, James. I think political violence in any context is wrong, as we've talked about on many occasions.
Yeah. And the reliance upon social media doesn't help either. It really has helped to divide and create a very standoffish community and nation down south of the border from me. But it's also happening in Canada. We saw an actor a few years back who had shot and killed his mother. He drove halfway across the country, and for those of you not familiar with Canada, it takes you a good 7 to 10 days to drive across Canada. But he got halfway there and turned himself into police, but what they found is that he was actually en route to Ottawa with weapons to shoot Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So again, it's not just about the political part, it's about the mental health parts of it as well. And even Canadian politicians now, some have hired personal security. Others have panic buttons. Meanwhile, even more are between secured doors in their ridings, really separating them from the people they represent. And it's having a major impact on the democratic process and the openness of government. So it's sad. And when news agencies act more like an entertainment, reality program instead of actual facts, dealing with issues and corroborating information, it just speaks volumes as to how much trouble we're in if we don't get a grip and have some real reliable people out there in the journalism field. In Canada, we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of reliable, respectable reporters and journalists being laid off at Chorus Network and one of our biggest cross-country news networks. So it's just feeding to that entertainment narrative instead of actually facts and information.
Indeed, I think the Romans had was it Socrates or maybe he was Greek, but there was a famous quote from the ancient times, 2,000 years ago: "Give them bread and circuses, and you can control the population." And that is essentially what's happening. Social media is a prime example. It's keep the population amused with irrelevances, and essentially you can take totalitarian control because their minds are seduced elsewhere to care. So yeah, social media is a good thing and it is a bad thing. It is a good thing in it's been able to disseminate. It's almost become an alternative news medium where the Sikh community in particular have been able to get out information to the world from the front line of the farmers' protests or the front line in the Punjab, wherever it may be, because to some degree it is outside the control of central government. But it has its evils. It is full of misinformation. It can sway whole populations politically and in all sorts of ways. So that's a very big issue, a very, very big issue. And misinformation actually does lead me on to my second story, and this is a story about the Canadian newspaper, the Globe and Mail, that James you've mentioned on many occasions. Now, the Globe and Mail is one of the most widely read newspapers across Canada, and of course, Canada has a large Sikh community, a very large Sikh population, and the Globe and Mail have been accused by one of the Sikh organisations of being, in many cases, almost an unwitting mouthpiece of the Indian government, because they've run a lot of stories over the years that have been written almost through the lens of the Indian government. They've been manipulated into reproducing Indian propaganda, Indian government propaganda, and anti-Sikh propaganda.
And accepting money for it.
Exactly. And they've... this gentleman, Jasveer Singh, who works for Sikh press agency, he's written a very interesting piece titled "The Globe and Mail's reporting has repeatedly fueled anti-Sikh rhetoric." And I won't go into too much detail, but I will pick out some key points that he's raised. So the World Sikh Organisation has been showing in their ongoing social media series that Canadian media outlets have long viewed Sikh issues through both an Indian state lens and often with a sneering, seemingly xenophobic tone. So he's talking about how this anti-Sikh theme has been reproduced in the Globe and Mail on a regular basis. He says anti-Sikh rhetoric online and elsewhere increases amongst Indian and Hindu nationalist actors, pushing this disinformation, and the Canadian far right upset with the growing strength of the Sikh Canadian community. So, of course, as Sikhs in Canada have become more vocal, they've become more activist, they have started to have their voices being heard at a political level, at a more senior political level now. And of course, this is upsetting many right-wing people, but most importantly, it's upsetting the Indian government, who are realising that the Sikh voice is now having an influence in Canadian politics. So they're fighting back with this, with their own clandestine ways through the Canadian media. So Jasveer continues, any Western outlet pushing a one-sided or faulty perception of Sikh stories deserves to be examined. And what he does then over the rest of the article, he gives several examples of articles, and he pulls these articles apart, just demonstrating how misinformation has been deliberately promulgated, has been spread by these articles. So he goes back to 2018. He said, I just started in 2018 because this was a convenient time. This is when Trudeau did a tour of India. And it was at that time that the Sikh community and the Khalistan movement became actually more prominent, particularly in Canada. So that was a good time to start his analysis. And he says in one particular article, Jagmeet Singh attended Sikh separatist rally in 2015. And the newspaper, as he said, plunged to new depths when they described the 1984 genocide as merely a violent crackdown. They also failed to acknowledge that even India itself, from its officials to its courts, had begun to describe the Indian government's campaign of death during the 80s and 90s as a genocide. So even when India were recognising it as a genocide, that the newspaper would not, in this article, would not recognise it as a genocide. And again, the same article, the vast majority of Sikhs oppose extremism. But that same article actually didn't say, what do they mean by extremism? What is this extremism that he refers to, that the article refers to? They didn't define what is the vast majority. And more importantly, they didn't actually they didn't consult with any Sikhs anybody from the Sikh community in the article. And this is a common theme in a lot of these articles, and we'll show this in some of the other articles. But the same article described Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale as a violent Sikh religious leader, and later in the same article as a violent extremist. Now don't forget, Bhindranwale's portrait hangs in every Gurdwara around the world. Bhindranwale is a revered person, and he was painted, as it continues, he was painted as violent and a fringe figure, rather than actually what the reality is. And again, even the he's been officially declared a Shaheed by the Akal Takht in Amritsar. So he's hardly, as it says, he's hardly the violent extremist that article actually painted him as. Another article from just a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, India's envoy calls on Canada to crack down on Canadian funding of Khalistan separatist movement. And he described this as a sensationalist piece through the lens of an Indian diplomat, without any competing Sikh sources, scaremongering about Canada's Khalistan movement. And again, this theme again, where the article was written without consulting the Sikh community, but instead the content came from India. It came from Indian government actors and activists. So of course it was going to be biased against Sikhs. Even Khalsa Aid Canada, who we referred to the other day, Jatinder Singh, noted how this is a prime example of misinformation, that one of the images that they used in this article of the Hamdir Sahib, its original caption, it showed a demonstration in that image. It was a demonstration against Operation Blue Star, of course, that attack, that dreadful attack in 1984 against the Hamdir Sahib. But it removed that caption and replaced it saying it was a pro-Khalistan protest with anti-government slogans. So again, they'd taken one image that was a protest against Operation Blue Star and said it was actually a pro-Khalistan, an anti-government protest, a blatant piece of propaganda, effectively. And the Sikh Press Association complained about this, and there was a lot of backwards and forwarding. But again, eventually, it was dismissed. That complaint was dismissed. And the regulators said they supported the Globe and Mail's claim that the edited caption was a mere graphic design decision. No, it wasn't. It was a simple piece of deliberate misinformation. And it continues, the piece solely relayed the concerns of the newly arrived High Commissioner for India without alternative opinions. Much of what was presented was done without evidence, and neither journalist critiqued what they were being fed. So again, highlighting this very simple fact that the whole piece was essentially dictated by the Indian government. There was no proper journalism involved. There was no balanced journalism where they should have consulted the Sikh community for their input on that article, which is actually a normal journalistic process. You should always get a balance of views so that you reach a balanced conclusion in your article. But of course, this didn't happen. And then another article, what is the Khalistan movement? How was Hardeep Singh Nijjar involved? This is only from 8 months ago. And again, this article was written by citing or quoting Arindam Bagchi, a spokesperson for New Delhi's External Affairs Department. Quotes from India's External Affairs Minister Subramanian Jaishankar and Shinder Puriwal, a political science professor at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, who is openly against Khalistan, but no Sikhs actually involved in the movement were consulted. And it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. And there's article after article, which I won't go into detail. But basically, the whole theme of this article, and it's very well founded, is that the Globe and Mail has almost unwittingly, whether deliberately or not, has produced articles on a regular basis that have attacked the Sikh community, that has been full of misinformation, full of essentially quotes from the Indian government to create this whole anti-Sikh image. It's all about manipulating the readership against the Sikh community. It's about, excuse me, it's about ostracizing Sikhs. It's about pushing the whole story of what happened, the whole history of that tragic history through the 80s and 90s of what happened in the Punjab as just minimizing the genocide. It's about pushing Sikhs into this bucket of being extremists, about trying to label anybody in support of Khalistan as a terrorist or an extremist. These are labels coming from India. They're not coming from independent journalists in Canada. They are being fed these labels. They are being fed these narratives, these fake narratives. As we've seen, it happens in Indian media all the time. That's just almost become taken for granted. But why is a Canadian one of the most widely read newspapers in Canada. Why is it becoming a mouthpiece for the Indian government? It's very concerning. And fortunately, it is being called out about this, James. But yeah, it's we as independent journalists, we've got to pick up on these stories and report it so that people are informed that these are not independently written articles. They are basically just narratives being fed by the Indian government.
Yeah. Absolutely. Again, you see the key trigger words such as extremism, which is very common in the Indian state-controlled or influenced media that you see all the time when they're talking about Sikhs and Muslims and that. They're always using the word extremism. Further to that, we did an episode recently, probably a couple weeks ago actually, and we looked at foreign interference, and we actually had a graph and a chart there. And one of the points that the Canadian government has concern with is the payment from foreign governments and foreign entities for issues to be printed as news stories such as this to the Canadian media, which is what we recognized as a gray area, but not an actual banned area or illegal action. So again, if you go back a few episodes there, you'll be able to find the episode that we talked about the foreign interference, and you may find, as viewers, you may find some information that you didn't see the last time you watched it, or if you haven't seen that episode, it's definitely worth going back to watch.
Yeah, that was actually very interesting because it just highlighted that inquiry, the results of that inquiry highlighted just how powerful the Indian, not just the media, but the whole Indian movement from the Indian government and the Hindutva army behind this, who are influencing politics now in the West. They're influencing Canadian politics clearly to a very large degree, and not just politics, but just in Canadian society through articles like this in newspapers. That they obviously have this whole army of people at every level, whether it's online, on Facebook, on social media, or whether it's even up to ministerial level, as we have seen. Money is changing hands and people are being influenced. The agenda and the narrative is being influenced. In Canada, it is happening in the UK, and it's clearly happening in the US as well. So, yeah, we have to call it out when it's found, as it indeed it has been found.
So, absolutely. And in that episode, we also touched on Russia being number 2 in the biggest threat to Canadian sovereignty, democracy, and independence. And that spot has been replaced by India. So now you've got China, India, and then Russia, as opposed to China, Russia, and there was 1 or 2 more in between there before you got to India in the past. So it shows they're moving up on the wrong lists in the international community.
Yeah, and again, it just highlights who India is aligning with. For some inexplicable reason, they seem keen to align with China and Russia, these 2 of the most undemocratic, totalitarian regimes on the planet. Well, India, it's sad. It's very sad. Okay,
especially when you consider how many of the Indian people are just amazing, loving people, welcoming in that. So it doesn't reflect a whole country of people. But unfortunately, for some people that don't have an open mind, they paint everybody with the same brush, as the saying goes. So it's sad because so many amazing Indian people are being painted with that same brush and looked at negatively.
Yeah, and as we said regularly, if you don't notice it, it'll be too late by the time you wake up. And the appeal has been to the Hindu community. That's right. Is realise what is being done in your name, because one day it could be you. So. Yeah. Anyway, right, let's move on. Time presses us once again, so let's move on to my final story. And we've got a short video for you, and it's a lovely video. Again, it highlights the beauty of Ladakh and the beautiful cultures of Ladakh. And we showed a similar video. It's only a couple of minutes long. It's a short one, but it showcases another community in this Himalayan region, this beautiful Himalayan region. But it also highlights once again the issues that were brought up in our first video the other day that we shared at Ladakh. It's very similar issues, but with another community within Ladakh. Here, let's take a look at this video.
अदल आस्ते आस्ते बदल होगा, अभी तक तो है, थोड़ा बदल तो हो जाएगा, आस्ते आस्ते हो जाएगा, आस्ते आस्ते ये गाना सब भी घूम जाएगा। हम दो है गाना गाने वाला, एक ऊपर वांगल बोलते हैं, एक हम है, हम बनने तक तो गाना ने ठीक रहते हैं, बाकी अभी लेते नहीं जवान सब ने, ये मुश्किल हो जाएगा, कल्चर ख़त्म हो जाएगा, क्या पता है आस्ते आस्ते। वो काम हो गया जनाब, अभी पूजा करना है, थोड़ा पूजा तो करते हैं, बकरी बकरी नहीं करता है ना, ये बंद हो गया अभी, लामा जी ने नहीं करा, ये पापा आएगा बोला था।
स्वर्ग में ले नहीं जा सकता, ये स्वर्ग में लेगा तो अब ना जो बुद्ध धर्म ने क्या सुनना, क्या पूजा किया है, क्या किया है, उसके बारे में पूजा करके मेडिटेशन करो, ये करो वो करो, किसी का जान लेना ठीक नहीं है।
Yeah, so there's a lot of it brings up a lot of issues here, and I won't talk much about this one because I think I said most things after the earlier version or the earlier video of Ladakh. But it's this is a story reflected actually not just in Ladakh, it's reflected in the Punjab in many degrees, where a lot of that inherent culture of the indigenous population is being diluted, whether deliberately or just by modernity. Is that the young generations are very easily seduced by modern society and what comes with modern society, and of course that in India particularly is driven by the Hindu government. They are very keen to dilute all these regions' indigenous cultures with their own culture. And again, we know there's an agenda behind that. They're trying to integrate Ladakh further into India, to bring it away from its old traditional roots, its old traditional cultures, which is essentially what they're doing in the Punjab and J&K as well. So it's, again, a beautiful land with such a lovely old culture. But is it inevitable that cultures like this will disappear over time? It probably is to some degree. But we should fight to preserve old cultures like this. We should fight to preserve their heritage, because once it's gone forever, James. It is sad to see cultures like this disappear.
It is, and as you touched on, it's a loss of cultural identity, the loss of the freedom and respect of their historic culture, and just their traditional ways of living, not only off the land, but how they raised their cattle and their farm animals in the wild. It's just such a loss for not just that culture and that community, but the world, I think, because that makes us better as a world when we understand more culture and more history. So,
yeah, and it brings to mind China's tactics over Tibet, where they've just basically absorbed Tibet against all international laws. And China have done exactly the same in Tibet. They've deliberately diluted the indigenous culture. They've flooded the region with indigenous Chinese people. And this is what's happening in the Punjab with Hindus and people from out of state being enticed through financial incentives and all sorts of incentives into the Punjab to deliberately dilute the indigenous culture, to weaken the voice of the indigenous people. So, and we see it here in Ladakh as well. So, yeah, it should be resisted to a large degree. Okay, let's move on to our comments. And yes, we said yesterday in yesterday's show that the previous day's show had a weird lack of comments, and we don't know why. And it has appeared, and after yesterday's show, we had a flood of wonderful comments. So thank you very much for all the comments that poured into our last show. And it was interesting because I did pick up one comment in that from somebody who said, I did actually comment, but it never appeared. So my suspicions remain raised. It may be a glitch in the matrix. It may be a weird algorithm thing with YouTube, but I'm always slightly suspicious of what Hindutva get up to, because as we reported yesterday, we know Hindutva are very active in trying to take down any pro-Khalistan, any pro-Sikh community channels, any articles, etc. They do their best to try and remove these from social media, from online websites and things. So who knows, they may have found a way to remove some of the comments from that previous story. But I'm delighted to report that your comments, thank you so much for all your wonderful and very supportive comments that poured in yesterday after yesterday's show. And we will cover a lot of those in tomorrow's shows. And there were some great comments, so do definitely watch tomorrow's show to cover a lot of those comments. But for today's show, well, we've gone back on some of the earlier comments and some of the comments that did finally get through after that show. And the first one from Barrett India is, this is an indulgence. Do forgive me for this little indulgence, but I like this comment. Angus and James, you two rock. Love you guys. And I picked this one particularly because as journalists, we're never seen as rock stars. We rarely get complimented. So this one was one of many very complimentary comments. And I wanted just to pick this one just as an example, just to say thank you so much to all of you, and particularly to our regular viewers who do send us such supportive and wonderful comments. It helps us keep going. You know, we are up against a very powerful force online. We are up against some very aggressive, I would say, and very dangerous parties who really want to see the end of us. So, you know, we do take a risk doing what we're doing, but we are very proud in what we're doing. We're very proud to support and highlight the Sikh community. So we loved what we're doing. And when we get comments like this, I'm just saying this just to say that we do read them and we very, very much appreciate them. So thank you for your support. And it's a two-way thing. You know, we can't exist without you guys. So it's a thank you back to you guys for watching us. It's as simple as that. So thank you for that comment, and to all the others for your comments. Gurcharan Dillon has made the comment, we do watch all your videos. Thank you for that. Good analysis. And this is actually in response to the chapter discussion where we have now inserted chapters in the description so you can jump to each video. And I did make a comment that I appreciate that not all our videos, all our sections will be of interest to everybody. But you have said, we do watch all your videos. So thank you so much for that. Good analysis. Thank you. Having English media on Sikh discussions is a good start by the Satellite TV team. This was a deliberate decision. Of course, a lot of our videos are in Punjabi for obvious reasons. That most of our audience first language is Punjabi. But of course, we do have a large audience in the US, in the UK and in Canada whose first or second language is English. And I remember one comment that we received some time ago from somebody saying, thank you for your English channel because it's actually helping some of our, particularly our younger viewers, learn English. So I hope our English is good enough that it acts as a good example of the English language. But yes, so this point here, we deliberately launched this English channel to reach a wider audience and also to actually hopefully engage with a non-Sikh audience, just to highlight the good things that happen coming from the Sikh community. And then the final bit here, I hope by the time Sikhs may have French, Spanish channels as well. Well, we have no plans for that. We are just a small organisation. We're doing what we can. But, you know, if our audience grows, and please spread the word about the channel, because the more audience that we can attract brings more resources that we can bring in to set up French and Spanish channels as well. We would love to do that, but it can only come with a larger audience. So please do spread the word. James, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
No, I love it that people are enjoying the station, that they want to see us succeed and they want to see growth. So that speaks volumes of that we're doing the right thing here, Angus. I think that's, as I said, that speaks volumes. That's beautiful. And thank you, everyone, for the wonderful comments. Yeah.
Now, one of our regular contributors, Cruella Indraville, made this comment, and actually you've made some great comments on yesterday's video, and it's just to watch tomorrow's stories, because we'll cover a lot of your comments, because you made some very important points in yesterday's video, Cruella. So thank you for those comments. But in this one you said, nice. The scary thing is that people are of the same ideology of Indian thinking are coming to the West and causing problems here. Yeah, this is about India spreading its dangerous narratives and its dangerous attitudes out into the diaspora. And we are seeing this divisiveness being spread into the diaspora. They are the Hindutva nationalists and the extremists are very deliberately whipping up Hindus, I say perfectly innocent, and I think I got mocked by saying innocent Hindus. One of our commenters, Amrit Pal, mentioned this. They are innocent, and I will keep saying this. There are many innocent Hindus. They're not enemies. They're not responsible for this. They're just victims of propaganda, as many people are. But yeah, they have been whipped up. Many Hindus have been whipped up to turn against other communities like the Muslims and the Sikh communities. They've been whipped up to turn on them and to become violent. So this horrible, divisive situation is coming out of India. It's spreading into the diaspora, and we must resist this. We must resist this wherever we see it, particularly in the diaspora, because we've got control of that. We have no control in India, but we do have control of it to some degree out in the UK and Canada and in the US. And wherever we see this this narrative coming out of India, we must stamp on it and call it out exactly for what it is, James.
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, a part of what we want to achieve is bringing that balance and the truth out to not just the Canadian audience or the UK audience, but people from around the globe who will hopefully tune in and watch the show, and for them to understand the difference between the reality and the truth versus the propaganda and the lies. So again, people are smart. When they get the information, they can start to disseminate the facts from fiction. So we hope.
And the evils of the caste system, again, very, very relevant to this comment. We've seen the caste system still actually in use in California. I think we've reported this in the past, where many of the tech giants, the high-tech giants like Google and Facebook, they've got a lot of Indian employees, and some of those employees are facing discrimination internally through the caste system. If they are of lower caste, they are struggling to get promoted because of some of their seniors might be of upper caste Indians, whether it's Brahmins or whatever. So it is. The caste system is spreading into the diaspora, and it must be stamped out wherever it is seen and called out for what it is, the evil that it is. Okay, and there were a few comments by the time we came to press on yesterday's show. So just picking up a few of these, and this follows actually the theme that I opened the comments with. Kalstan Nijat said, "Thanks for teaching the depths of politics to Punjabi and Sikh community." And the next comment: "We need reality shows like this. Thanks so much for doing this. Hi guys, thanks for the show. I love it. At least we now have good true media. Very compelling analysis. Thank you." Thank you very much for these comments, and I picked these again because it's something I wanted to ask actually our audience, is that we try to obviously pick stories that are very relevant to our audience, to the Sikh community. So we do spend a lot of time researching and backing up and corroborating stories. We see a lot of stuff on social media that we do try to ensure isn't just misinformation, that we try to corroborate it. And part of what we're trying to do in this first comment is thanks for teaching the depths of politics to the communities. Is it boring? Is it interesting? I don't know. But judging by the comments that we get back, hopefully we are hitting the right note. But this is why I often do ask, is tell us, send us bits of information, as many of you have done in the comments. If you see a story that you think we should be covering, let us know, because we'd love to cover these things. We always go far and wide for stories to cover to make sure that we bring you stuff that you want to hear about. But again, a lot of this comes from you guys. It comes from the audience. Tell us if you see news items that you think are really important that we probably have missed. Let us know about it. But again, part of our ethos, why do we exist? We exist to hopefully send out a message to a wider audience, a non-Sikh audience, about the wonderful things that the Sikh community do around the world. But also, as part of that, we are here to hopefully educate is the wrong word, that's very patronising. We're here to, to spread more information, to disseminate information, correct information and corroborated information to the Sikh community and indeed to the Punjabi community. And of course our Punjabi audience, for those very few people who've managed to view us in the Punjab through VPNs, thank you for doing that. But also please spread the word, because a lot of what we want to do is we exist to act as an alternative to the Indian government narrative. And this is where the friction happens, is because we are offering the truth, hopefully. We are offering a story that the Indian government are too afraid or terrified to report on, and the Indian media are too partisan to report on. We are giving information out that we believe is the truth, that the Indian media will not cover deliberately, or they will twist into an Indian government narrative. So it's very important that as many people within India, and particularly the Punjab, get to hear our message. Because our message, we are just recycling the message of the Sikh community that exists outside of India, who of course see the truth. They see what is happening. They know what's happening in the Punjab. Of course, Amritpal Singh. We know stories about Amritpal Singh, Jagtar Singh, Jairhal, all these people who are rotting in jail, who the people in the Punjab are probably getting a very different narrative from the Indian media about. So it's very important that our audience stretches out as far as possible into India. So if you're watching in India on a VPN, tell as many people as you can. Get a VPN. If you have access to a VPN, try and spread that to as many people as you can, because the internet is becoming more and more widely available. More and more people have access to the internet. VPNs cost money. That is an unfortunate thing. But if you can get as many people to watch us in India, then it opens up. It gets this important message to as many people as we can. It's all about communication. This is why the Indian government closed down the internet. Anytime there's any trouble, the first thing they do is close down communications. So we exist. Yeah. We are the enemy of the Indian government because we communicate. We send these important messages to those who need to hear them most, the people in the Punjab. So sorry to go on about that, but it's very, very important. So thank you for these comments. It has raised a lot of very important points, which hopefully I've now got across. James, hopefully you've got some ideas on that as well.
Absolutely, but in the interest of time, I think I'll save those for the next comment section in the next show.
Indeed.
Because much like yourself, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. So
yeah, and we do have a lot of great comments that we will report on in tomorrow's show. So do make sure you watch tomorrow's show. But there we must call it to a close because time has once again caught up with us. But that, as always, has been Perspectives. Don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Please do send us all your comments about stories, as I mentioned, that you'd like us to cover. And of course, anything else that you'd just like to bring up. We do like to read them. And you can, of course, message us directly at message@satlegetv.com on any news items that you would like us to highlight. And of course, do feel free to send us videos of yourself. We still haven't received any videos yet, so you're all too shy. Don't be shy. Let us know what you want to talk about on video. We will share it, as we said. But in the meantime, we must move on, and we will see you in tomorrow's show. It is goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.